October 26, 1942, 12,000 feet above the Solomon Islands. The air inside the cockpit of the HD-3A VAL dive bomber smells of exhaust fumes and the distinct metallic tang of adrenaline. Below, the Pacific Ocean is a sprawling canvas of deep indigo, broken only by the white wakes of the American Task Force 61. Japanese Lieutenant Takahashi tightens his grip on the stick. Through the perspex canopy, he sees the target, the USS Hornet. The American carrier looks like a frantic beetle on a pond, turning hard to port, its wake carving a desperate white crescent into the sea. But Takahashi isn't worried about the ship's maneuvers yet. He is worried about the black clouds blooming in the sky around him. Whump, whump, whump. Black puffs of smoke materialize in the air 300 yards to his left. Takahashi doesn't flinch. He doesn't even blink. He watches the explosions dissipate into harmless gray smudges. He knows the rhythm of American anti-aircraft fire. He understands its fatal flaw. To the Japanese pilots of the Kaido Budai, American flak is dangerous, certainly, but it is also mathematically arrogant. It assumes a pilot will fly in a straight line, at a constant speed like a training drone. Takahashi banks his wings slightly, a gentle slide to the right. A second later, a cluster of 5-inch shells detonates exactly where he would have been if he hadn't moved. He permits himself a grim smile. The Americans are playing a game of geometry, trying to solve a three-dimensional equation with a slide rule while he changes the variables every second. They are firing at ghosts. Down on the deck of the battleship South Dakota, protecting the carrier, the scene is chaos. Elevation 60, train right. Gunner's mate second class Miller is screaming over the roar of the twin-mount 5-inch guns. The heat is suffocating. The gun barrel is radiating waves of distortion that make the sky look like it's melting. Miller isn't looking at the sky, though. He is looking at the fuse setter. This is the bottleneck of the entire United States Navy. In 1942, shooting down an airplane with a heavy shell is a feat of manual labor and desperate guessing. It is not enough to aim the gun at the plane. If the shell hits the plane, great, but that almost never happens. The sky is too big, the plane is too small. To kill the pilot, you need the shell to explode near him. To make that happen, a sailor in the bowels of the ship has to estimate the aircraft's altitude. He shouts it to the gun crew. Miller grabs a 55-pound shell. He shoves the nose into a mechanical cutter, the fuse setter. The machine rotates the nose ring of the shell, cutting a time delay into the fuse train. 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. If the shell travels for 4 seconds and the plane is still there, the black powder burns down, sparks the charge, and boom, shrapnel. But Miller knows the truth as he heaves the shell into the breach. By the time he cuts the fuse, loads the tray and the gun fires. The data is already old. The shell takes 10 seconds to fly up there. That is 10 seconds for Lieutenant Takahashi to dip his wing, to change his throttle, to laugh at the clumsy Americans. Fire. The gun kicks back with a force that rattles Miller's teeth. He watches the tracer streak upward. It's a good shot. It looks perfect. It screams toward the lead Japanese bomber. The shell passes 10 feet under the Japanese plane's belly. In a modern war, that would be a kill. But this is 1942. The shell does not explode. It keeps flying, dumb and blind, waiting for its mechanical timer to tick down. It detonates 500 feet above the Japanese formation, uselessly shredding the empty air. High above, Takahashi pushes the stick forward. The valve screams into its dive. The deck of the Hornet rushes up to meet him. The anti-aircraft fire thickens. The smaller 40 and 20 guns join the chorus, but the heavy 5-inch shells, the ones that could tear his plane apart with a single blast, are lagging behind him, exploding in his wake like angry, impotent thunderclaps. The Japanese pilots have learned the lesson well. The Americans are slow. Their shells are blind. If you keep moving, if you keep dancing, you are invincible. Takahashi releases his bomb. He pulls out of the dive, feeling the G-force crush him into his seat, and rockets back toward the safety of the clouds. He looks back. Smoke is pouring from the Hornet. The American gunners slam their fists against the hot steel of their mounts. They have fired thousands of rounds. They have filled the sky with steel. And yet the Zeros and Vals swarm around them, untouched, mocking the industrial might of the United States with every evasive roll. They need a miracle. They need a shell that can think. November 1942. A converted Chevrolet dealership, Silver Spring, Maryland. 8,000 miles away from the smoke-choked waters of the South Pacific, the miracle is sitting on a wooden workbench, and it looks nothing like a weapon of war. It looks like a radio. Dr. Merle Tuve, a physicist with eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep, stares at the assembly. To the passing pedestrian outside this nondescript garage, nothing interesting is happening here. But inside, under the code name, Section T, the United States is attempting to break the laws of physics. The challenge facing Tuve and his team at the Applied Physics Laboratory is stark. The Navy has asked them to shrink a radar station, which usually fills a room, down to the size of a milk bottle. They have to fit a transmitter, a receiver, a power source, and a safety switch into the nose of a 5-inch shell. But miniaturization is the easy part. The hard part is the violence. Tuve picks up a vacuum tube, the T3. It is a tiny glass cylinder, no larger than a peanut. It is the heart of the smart shell. It sends out radio waves that bounce off an enemy plane and reflect back to the shell. When the signal gets strong enough, meaning the plane is close, the tube triggers the detonator. In a lab, it works perfectly, but a 5-inch naval gun is not a lab, it is a cannon. When a 5-inch shell is fired, it accelerates from 0 to 2,600 feet per second in the length of the barrel. It spins at 25,000 revolutions per minute. The force exerted on the internal components hits 20,000 GS. Imagine, one of the engineers mutters, holding a soldering iron, taking a crate of light bulbs, packing them into an artillery shell, shooting them into a concrete wall, and expecting them to still be lit when they hit the ground. For months, the floor of the garage has been littered with failure. Every time they test a prototype at the Dahlgren Proving Ground, the result is the same. The gun fires, and the electronics inside turn into glass dust before the shell even leaves the barrel. The vacuum tubes simply implode under the crushing weight of their own acceleration. The Japanese pilots are right to mock the Americans. What Section T is trying to do is widely considered impossible. But Tuve is stubborn. He realizes that mechanical springs and cushioning, the standard way to protect delicate electronics, are useless against 20,000 GS. The springs just collapse. He needs something radical. He stops trying to cushion the tubes. Instead, he decides to bury them. The team begins experimenting with potting compounds. They take the delicate glass tubes, wire them up, and then pour molten wax and plastic around them, encasing the entire electronic brain in a solid block of resin. They aren't giving the tubes room to move. They are freezing them in place, making the glass part of the solid structure of the shell. They try again. January 5, 1943, Dahlgren Proving Ground, Virginia. The air is freezing. A 5-inch gun points toward the gray sky over the Potomac River. The test shell is loaded. Inside its nose is the newest iteration of the variable time, VT Fuze, encased in its plastic. Tomb. Fire. The boom rolls across the river. The shell screams upward. This time there is no target plane. The test is simple. Tell the shell to detonate after a set time, but only if the electronics survived the launch. If the radio is dead, the shell will fall into the water as a dud. The team holds their breath, counting the seconds. High above the water, a puff of gray smoke appears. It worked. The radio survived the launch. It woke up, it hummed with electricity, and it triggered the charge. Tuve doesn't celebrate. He knows that building one miracle isn't enough. They need millions, and they need to get them to the Pacific before the Japanese Navy finishes off the American fleet. But there is a terrifying catch. The military brass issues a top-secret order, classified even higher than the schematics for the weapon itself. These shells must never be fired over land. if a VT fuse were to crash into the ground without exploding, and Japanese or German engineers recovered. They would see the miniature radar. They would understand the secret, and within months they would develop a countermeasure, a jammer that would render the American miracle useless. So the weapon is shipped out with a strict set of rules. It can only be used over the open ocean, where the secrets will sink to the bottom of the sea. The trap is set. Now they just need the Japanese to fly into it. June 19, 1944, the Philippine Sea. The horizon is a smudge of gray haze and nervous energy. Aboard the battleship USS Indiana, part of the massive defensive screen protecting the American carriers, the loudspeaker crackles to life. Raid 1, bearing 260, distance 15 miles, closing fast. The Battle of the Philippine Sea, what history will remember as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, has begun. Vice Admiral Ozawa has thrown everything he has at the U.S. Navy, hundreds of aircraft in a desperate bid to smash the American fleet before they can take Saipan. High above the fleet, Japanese Warrant Officer Sakamoto leads his flight of JIL torpedo bombers. He is a veteran. He has survived the Solomons. He has survived Rabaul. He knows the Americans have more ships now and better radar, but he also knows their weakness. Their heavy flak is still clumsy. He signals his wingmen, spread out, vary your altitude. Below him, the ocean lights up. The American battleships and cruisers open fire. The sky fills with the familiar black blossoms of 5-inch shell bursts. Sakamoto pushes his stick left, banking hard. He watches a cluster of tracers streak past his right wing. He calculates the trajectory in his head. The shells are going to pass behind him. He braces himself for the harmless whump of a detonation far to his rear. He is wrong. The shell passing 20 yards off his tail isn't blind. As it screams past the Japanese aluminum skin, the tiny radar transmitter in its nose, Dr. Tuve's Section T miracle, pings a signal off Sakamoto's fuselage. The signal bounces back to the receiver. The vacuum tubes, encased in their wax tombs, scream now. The shell doesn't wait for a timer. It detonates instantly. Sakamoto never hears the explosion. A curtain of high-velocity shrapnel shreds his tail section. His plane violently pitches forward, the controls severed and spirals into the sea. To his wingman, it looks like black magic. There was no direct hit. The American shell seemed to miss, yet the plane disintegrated anyway. Down on the deck of the Indiana, the gun crews are working with a terrifying mechanical rhythm. The tedious shouting of fuse times is gone. The fuse setters are gone. Now the loaders just grab the shells marked VT and shove them into the breeches as fast as their arms can move. Load fire, load fire. The rate of fire is relentless, but it's the lethality that is sickening. A flight of Japanese Judy dive bombers attempts to penetrate the screen. In 1942, they would have woven through the flak, taking maybe 1 or 2 losses. Today they fly into a wall. The sky essentially becomes a minefield. The American shells don't need to hit the planes. They just need to get within 70 feet of them. Every shell that passes a Japanese plane becomes a lethal event. The Japanese formation crumbles. Planes explode in midair, their fuel tanks ruptured by shrapnel from misses. Wings shear off. Engines catch fire. An American observer on the bridge of the carrier Lexington watches through his binoculars, stunned. He sees a Japanese plane jink to avoid a tracer. A shell explodes below it. The plane catches fire. The pilot bails out. Another plane tries to dive under the barrage. A shell explodes above it. The plane slams into the water. It's like an old-fashioned turkey shoot down there. A pilot from the USS Enterprise yells over the radio, coining the phrase that will define the battle. By the time the sun sets, the Imperial Japanese Navy's air power has ceased to exist. Over 300 Japanese aircraft have been swatted from the sky. The American losses are negligible. The surviving Japanese pilots return to their carriers, if they can find them, shaken and confused. They report that the American flak was heavy, yes, but also impossible. They say the Americans have learned to aim with supernatural precision. They don't realize that aim had nothing to do with it. The rules of aerial warfare have changed forever. The safety of near misses is gone. But as the American fleet pushes closer to the Japanese home islands, the desperation of the enemy is about to force a new, terrifying tactic, one that relies not on returning home, but on becoming the weapon itself. And against a missile piloted by a human with a death wish, even the smartest shell might not be enough. April 6, 1945, Radar Picket Station 1, north of Okinawa. The sky is weeping steel. Operation Tengo has begun. The Japanese military, realizing the war is lost, has embraced a doctrine of total annihilation. They launch the first of 10 mass Kikyusui, floating chrysanthemum, attacks. 355 kamikaze aircraft are swarming toward the American fleet like angry hornets protecting a dying hive. On the deck of the destroyer USS Newcomb, the world has narrowed to a terrifying vertical tunnel. Diver starboard beam, he's coming in. A Japanese Zeke fighter tips its wing over. The pilot, wearing a Hachimaki headband, pushes his throttle to the firewall. He isn't trying to drop a bomb, he is the bomb. In 1942, American gunners were trained to lead the target. They were taught to aim where the plane would be. But you cannot lead a suicide pilot. He doesn't jink. He doesn't weave. He fixes his eyes on the bridge of the ship and falls toward it with the inevitability of gravity. The 20 Oerlikon cannons chatter, sending streams of red tracers into the sky. They hit the plane. Pieces of the cowling fly off. Smoke trails from the engine. But the plane keeps coming. A dead pilot can still guide a plane for those final few seconds. A damaged engine can still scream toward impact. The gunnery officer screams into his headset. All main batteries, VT, rapid fire. This is the ultimate test. The smart shell was designed to shoot down planes trying to survive. Now it must stop planes trying to die. The twin 5-inch turrets swing around with a mechanical whine. The loaders, sweat stinging their eyes, shove the VT-fused shells into the breeches. There is no time to set fuses. There is no time to calculate. There is only the desperate need to put a wall of fragmentation into the air. Crack, 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 crack. The 5-inch guns fire in rapid succession, the recoil rocking the destroyer. The shells race upward to meet the diving zero. The first shell misses the nose by 40 feet. In the old days, that would have been a wasted shot. Today, the radar in the nose of the shell wakes up. It senses the reflection of the Zero's aluminum skin. Detonate. A sphere of jagged steel erupts directly in the flight path of the Kamikaze. It doesn't just poke holes in the wings, it shreds the airframe. The blast wave slams into the Zero like a physical hammer. The propeller is sheared off. The right wing separates from the fuselage. The plane, suddenly stripped of its aerodynamics, ceases to be a missile and becomes a flaming heap of wreckage. It tumbles out of the sky, splashing harmlessly into the ocean 100 yards from the Newcomb's hull. But there is no time to cheer. Another one, port quarter. For hours, the sky is filled with the black puffs of VT explosions. The air over Okinawa becomes a meat grinder. The Japanese pilots, expecting to find glory in a fiery collision, instead find themselves flying into a mathematical impossibility. They are blown out of the sky before they can get within lethal range. The Section T secret, the impossible radio in a milk bottle, does what no amount of courage or manual aiming could do. It creates a shield of invulnerability. By the time the sun sets on the Pacific War, the statistics will tell the story. The VT fuse is calculated to be 5 times more effective than standard ammunition. It didn't just improve the odds, it rewrote them. As the smoke clears over the fleet, a message is relayed from the heavy cruisers to the destroyers, and eventually back to the Pentagon. It is a sentiment that will later be echoed by General George Patton regarding the ground war in Europe, but it rings truest here, on the burning water of the Pacific. The enemy thought they were fighting men. They didn't realize they were fighting the future.